On December 15, 2009, in a quiet neighborhood of Atlanta, Angela Matthews opened her door to a visitor, someone she later wished she had turned away. What started as a harmless interaction with the neighbor's son quickly spiraled into a series of secrets and decisions that no one in the close-knit community could have foreseen. By the time the truth came to light, tragedy had already struck, and the life of one suburban housewife would soon become a whispered cautionary tale across the neighborhood. Angela Angie Matthews was a beautiful 38-year-old woman, married to Marcus Matthews, a successful businessman often away on business. From the outside, they appeared to have an enviable life, a luxurious home, expensive cars, and a seemingly perfect marriage. But under the surface, Angie felt an emptiness that wealth alone couldn't fill. That afternoon, while Marcus was away on another business trip, Angie found herself growing close to Jamal Thompson, the 22-year-old son of their neighbor. Jamal, a bright and ambitious young man, had grown up next door. Angie had watched him mature from a boy into a man, and something about his youthful energy stirred emotions she hadn't felt in years. Their connection began innocently. Smiles exchanged, lingering glances, casual conversations by the fence that divided their yards. But on that December day, the simmering attraction between them reached a breaking point. Under the pretense of fixing a broken faucet, Jamal visited Angie's home. One thing led to another, and soon they were in each other's arms, crossing a line they knew should never be crossed. Their affair began in secrecy, fueled by the thrill of forbidden encounters. Whenever Marcus was away, Angie would invite Jamal over, turning her home into a private retreat for their stolen moments. The secrecy and risk of being caught only intensified their connection, adding an edge to their hidden encounters. They convinced themselves they could keep the affair under wraps, that no one would ever find out. But they were wrong. By February 2, 2010, the affair had been ongoing for nearly 2 months, and Angie and Jamal had grown bolder and more reckless. The danger of discovery only heightened the excitement, pushing them to take greater risks. They met at odd hours, sometimes even during the day, relying on Marcus's frequent absences to cover their tracks. That fateful morning, Marcus was supposed to be in Chicago for a business meeting. Confident that she had the house to herself, Angie invited Jamal over as usual, and they spent hours together, lost in the intensity of their relationship. But what they didn't know was that Marcus had wrapped up his meeting early and decided to surprise his wife by coming home ahead of schedule. At 2:45 p.m., Marcus pulled into the driveway while Angie and Jamal were upstairs, completely unaware of his arrival. As Marcus entered the house, he called out for Angie, his voice echoing through the quiet halls. Angie's heart skipped a beat when she heard him, panic setting in as she realized the danger they were in. Frantically, she pushed Jamal out of bed, urging him to hide. Jamal, half-dressed and shaken, barely had time to slip out of the bedroom and into the nearby bathroom. Unaware of the tension in the air, Marcus made his way upstairs, calling Angie's name. Angie quickly composed herself, forcing a smile as she met Marcus in the hallway. She came up with a quick excuse about taking a nap, hoping he wouldn't notice the disarray of the bedroom behind her. Exhausted from his trip, Marcus didn't question her, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, and headed to the bathroom to freshen up. Angie's heart raced, realizing Jamal was still hiding in there. Fortunately, Marcus decided to use the guest bathroom downstairs instead. As soon as he was out of sight, Angie whispered for Jamal to slip out through the back door. Jamal quietly exited, narrowly avoiding being caught. The close call left them both shaken, but the excitement was now mixed with fear. Despite the scare, Angie and Jamal found it impossible to end their affair. They were drawn to the thrill, the adrenaline, and the way they made each other feel. Their meetings continued, but with even more secrecy and daring. On February 20th, 2010, however, their luck began to run out. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman across the street known for keeping a close eye on neighborhood happenings, had started noticing strange visits to the Matthews house. That afternoon, she saw Jamal sneaking into Angie's home, glancing around nervously as if hoping not to be seen. Mrs. Jenkins, ever curious, observed from her window, her suspicion growing. Later that evening, during a casual conversation with a neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins couldn't resist mentioning what she'd witnessed. In the tight-knit community, Gossip spread quickly, and soon rumors were swirling. It wasn't long before the whispers reached Patrice, who would bring even more tension to the story unfolding on the quiet block. Jamal's mother, Patrice Thompson, a deeply religious woman with high expectations for her son, grew concerned when she heard unsettling rumors about him. That night, she confronted Jamal, demanding to know if there was any truth to the whispers she'd heard. Caught off guard, Jamal denied everything, insisting that Mrs. Jenkins, the neighborhood gossip, must have been mistaken. But Patrice was suspicious. Although she had no evidence, the seeds of doubt had already been planted in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her son was hiding something. Jamal, despite his denial, felt the walls closing in. The secret affair, once thrilling and liberating, now felt like a ticking time bomb, threatening to explode at any moment. He and Angie had no idea just how catastrophic that explosion would be. On the evening of March 5, 2010, tension hung heavy in the Matthews home. Angela Matthews, overwhelmed by guilt, had wrestled with her conscience for weeks. The burden of her relationship with Jamal had become unbearable, and she decided it was time to end it, fearing that continuing the affair would only lead to more trouble. However, she couldn't have anticipated the consequences. Around 7 p.m., Angie invited Jamal over, under the pretense of another usual rendezvous. But instead of the passionate reunion he expected, Jamal was met with a serious Angie. She informed him that the affair had to end, that things had become too dangerous, and they both needed to move on. Jamal, who had grown deeply attached to Angie, felt his world shatter. After everything they'd shared, she was ending it so abruptly. Shock gave way to anger as he accused her of using him, of playing with his feelings. Angie tried to stay calm, explaining that it wasn't about that, but Jamal wasn't listening. Desperation took over, his voice rising as he pleaded for her to reconsider. But Angie stood firm, telling him it was over and urging him to leave. The argument quickly escalated. Jamal, feeling trapped and rejected, grew more aggressive, grabbing Angie's arm, pleading one last time. Angie, alarmed, pulled away and demanded he leave immediately. In a sudden fit of rage, Jamal pushed her back. Angie, caught off balance, stumbled toward the staircase. In those few agonizing seconds, she lost her footing and fell backward, tumbling down the stairs before landing motionless at the bottom. Silence filled the house. Jamal stood at the top of the stairs, paralyzed, staring down in horror at Angie's still form. Heart pounding, he rushed down the stairs, calling her name, but there was no response. Angie was gone, her neck twisted at a disturbing angle, her eyes fixed in a lifeless stare. The fall had been fatal. Terrified, Jamal fled, leaving her body where it lay. He raced back to his own home, his mind reeling with guilt and panic. He didn't know where to go or what to do. All he knew was that he had just lost everything. The next morning, on March 6, 2010, Marcus Matthews returned from another business trip, expecting to find Angie there to greet him. Instead, he was met with an unsettling silence. As he moved through the house, dread filled him. Realizing something was terribly wrong, something felt deeply wrong. Marcus sensed it as soon as he entered the house, but it wasn't until he reached the bottom of the stairs that he saw her. Angie's body lay lifeless on the floor, her limbs sprawled in a way that immediately signaled to Marcus that this was no ordinary fall. His breath caught in his throat as he rushed to her side, desperately searching for a pulse, but her skin was cold. Panic took over as he dialed 911, his hands shaking while he tried to explain what he had found. Within minutes, paramedics and police arrived. The responders quickly confirmed what Marcus already feared. Angie was gone. The scene was a whirlwind of activity as officers worked to assess the situation. Yet, amidst the chaos, one person stood focused and collected. Detective Bryant, a seasoned investigator. As he surveyed the scene, he couldn't shake a gut feeling that something was off. The way Angie's body lay, the angle of her fall, the injuries she had sustained, everything felt too intentional, too forceful to be a mere accident. On March 8, 2010, the investigation into Angie's death officially commenced. Marcus was the first to be questioned, and he was visibly devastated, struggling to recount his last conversations with Angie, describing her as joyful and healthy. He couldn't comprehend how something like this could have happened. When detectives asked about their marriage, Marcus insisted they were happy and had no significant issues. He loved his wife deeply, and the idea that someone could have harmed her was unbearable. As detectives canvassed the neighborhood, they spoke with several residents, including Mrs. Jenkins, the ever-watchful neighbor known for her attention to everyone's business. Mrs. Jenkins was quick to share what she had observed. She had noticed Jamal visiting Angie often, especially when Marcus was out of town. To her, it seemed clear that something was going on between the two. This information caught Detective Bryant's attention. Sensing that there might be more to the story, he began to delve deeper into the connection between Jamal and Angie. On March 12, 2010, Jamal was brought in for questioning. Nervous and clearly uneasy, he struggled to keep his composure, but it was evident that he was under immense pressure. He denied any involvement in Angie's death, claiming he hadn't seen her in days. However, his story didn't align with certain details, and his alibi was flimsy at best. Detective Bryant observed Jamal carefully, noting his nervous demeanor and how he avoided certain questions. To Bryant, these were signs of a person hiding something. He remained unconvinced by Jamal's denials, sensing there was still more to uncover. Meanwhile, Patrice Thompson, Jamal's mother, grew increasingly concerned. She knew her son well and could see the weight of something troubling on his shoulders. She tried to get him to open up, to confide in her, but Jamal remained silent, consumed by fear. He knew that investigators were closing in, and the sense of impending doom was suffocating. On March 20, 2010, a crucial breakthrough in the investigation surfaced. Forensic evidence from the scene, meticulously collected and analyzed, started to shed light on what truly happened that night. Among the findings, Jamal's fingerprints were discovered on the stair railing, confirming he had been in the Matthews home. However, the most incriminating evidence came from the recovery of text messages from Angie's phone, revealing the intimate and conflicted relationship between her and Jamal, as well as details of the argument they had the night she died. Armed with this evidence, police moved forward with an arrest. That afternoon, Jamal was detained at his home. The severity of the situation became undeniable as he was handcuffed and escorted away, charged with second-degree murder, on the grounds of having caused Angie's death in a heated moment. As he was taken into custody, the consequences of his actions began to weigh heavily on him. The once thrilling affair that had sparked excitement and passion had ultimately led to devastation. Angie was gone, Marcus was left to grieve, and Jamal faced a future in prison. News of the arrest spread quickly, fueling rumors and gossip that had been circulating for months within the neighborhood. What had once been whispers behind closed doors was now a widely known tragedy, and the community was left reeling. By April 15, 2010, the city of Atlanta was abuzz with talk of the Matthews-Thompson trial. It wasn't just another court case, it was a scandal that people discussed in grocery store lines and whispered about on porches. A housewife, her young lover, and a tragic death. The story had all the elements of drama and scandal, capturing the attention of the entire neighborhood and beyond. The courthouse overflowed with people eager to witness the unfolding of the sensational trial. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Carla Henderson, started with a compelling case. Known for her relentless approach, Henderson presented the timeline of events leading to Angie's death. Her case relied on compelling forensic evidence, including Jamal's fingerprints on the railing, the text messages exchanged between him and Angie, and the bruises on Angie's arms, which hinted at a struggle. Henderson described Jamal as a young man who, unable to handle rejection, allowed anger to take over, ultimately leading to the tragic death of the woman he claimed to love. On April 16, 2010, neighbors began to take the stand, each sharing their observations in the months preceding Angie's death. Mrs. Jenkins was first. With a steady voice, she recounted seeing Jamal sneaking into Angie's home on multiple occasions, often when Marcus was away. She recalled how rumors had circulated in the neighborhood, whispers that most people had ignored or dismissed. Her testimony bolstered the prosecution's case, painting a picture of an affair that, while unspoken, had not gone unnoticed. Marcus Matthews took the stand on April 18, 2010. Approaching the witness stand with a heavy heart, he spoke with evident grief. Marcus described his marriage to Angie, explaining that while they had once been close, the relationship had grown distant over time. He acknowledged that his frequent absences due to work had caused strain, but he insisted he had no knowledge of Angie's affair until the investigation revealed it. He expressed his love for his wife, his shock upon discovering her lifeless body, and his anguish over losing her in such a tragic way. On April 20th, 2010, the defense began presenting their side, led by attorney Jonathan Reed. They argued that while the affair was a serious lapse in judgment, it did not constitute a crime. Patrice Thompson, Jamal's mother, took the stand to defend her son. Visibly shaken, Patrice described Jamal as a respectful young man who had never been in trouble before. She spoke about raising him alone and her efforts to guide him in life. Through tears, she asked the jury to view her son as a young man who had made a grave mistake in a moment clouded by anger and confusion. On April 23, 2010, the defense delivered their closing argument, contending that Angie's death was not an intentional act, but a tragic accident. Reed argued that Jamal had not intended harm, that the fatal fall was the outcome of a heated argument that spiraled out of control. He pointed to Jamal's efforts to reach out to Angie during her fall, emphasizing that there was no premeditation involved. According to Reed, the tragedy stemmed not from malice, but from an unfortunate escalation that neither could have foreseen. However, the prosecution remained firm, arguing that the evidence pointed to a crime driven by intense jealousy and desperation. After weeks of testimony and thorough deliberation, the jury reached a decision on May 10, 2010. The courtroom was tense with anticipation as everyone awaited the outcome. Jamal Thompson was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Though it was a lesser charge than the initial accusation of second-degree murder, it still carried a heavy sentence. Jamal was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with a possibility of parole after 10 years. As the sentence was read, Patrice's cries filled the courtroom, her grief echoing through the space. Jamal, now in shackles, hung his head in remorse as the weight of his choices and the reality of his lost freedom became painfully clear. The trial's aftermath left deep wounds for everyone involved. On June 5, 2010, Marcus Matthews made the difficult choice to sell the home he had shared with Angie for so many years. The memories, the laughter, the disagreements, and the heartbreaking tragedy that shattered his life had become too much to bear. Remaining in a neighborhood where everyone knew his story meant constant reminders through whispers and sympathetic looks. Seeking a fresh start, Marcus packed his belongings and left, hoping to rebuild in a place where he could find peace away from the past. For Patrice, the pain was twofold. Not only had she lost her son to the prison system, but she also lost the respect and privacy she had once cherished. Her once active presence in the community faded as she became more withdrawn, her heart heavy with sorrow over Jamal's actions. Neighbors who used to greet her warmly now averted their eyes, unsure of what to say. The once vibrant, close-knit neighborhood was left fractured, with the scandal serving as a constant reminder of how quickly life could unravel.